What made you quit a job on the spot? I worked for this tech startup called Flow Budget that made money tracking apps. Fresh out of college, it felt like winning the lottery. The office had free snacks, beanbags, and our CEO wore flip-flops to meetings. Everyone called him Nick instead of Mr. Whatever. It was everything I dreamed of. For 2 years, I loved going to work. My team was like family. We'd grab lunch together, share memes in Slack, and actually cared about making good software. When we launched our biggest feature update, I led the whole project. It saved the company like $40,000 and got us featured in some tech blog. I thought for sure I was getting promoted. Monday morning, HR called me into this tiny conference room. I was pumped, thinking, finally, here comes my raise. Instead, Amanda from HR slides this clipboard across the table with a list of names on it. 5 names, all people from my team. She goes, "We need to downsize the product division. These employees need to be terminated by Friday." I'm staring at this list, and it's like my brain couldn't process what she was saying. There's Kevin, who just had his first kid. Lisa, who literally moved here from Oregon for this job. Ben, who's been here longer than me and knows our code base better than anyone. "So you want me to do performance reviews or something?" I asked, still not getting it. "No, you need to fire them. All of them." This week, my stomach dropped. Fire them? Why me? You're their team lead. It makes sense coming from you instead of management. I'm looking at this list again, and that's when I see it. My own name at the bottom in the same font as everyone else. Wait, is this Am I on here too? Amanda nods like she's telling me what's for lunch. Yes, but we'd like you to handle the others first. Then we'll discuss your severance package. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You want me to fire my friends and then get fired myself? She actually smiled like this was totally normal. It would really help us out. I just sat there for a minute trying to make sense of it. They wanted me to destroy 5 people's lives, then get my own life destroyed. All to make their Monday easier. The more I thought about it, the madder I got. I stood up and walked back to my desk. Everyone was working normally. Kevin was showing Lisa some funny video on his phone. Ben was explaining code to Jake, our intern. They had no idea what was coming. I opened Slack and sent private messages to all 5 people on the list. Meet me in the park across the street right now. Don't ask questions, just come. They probably thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Jake made jokes about getting surprise tacos. Kevin asked if we were doing team building exercises, but they all followed me outside. Standing under this big oak tree, I told them everything. How they were all getting fired. How I was supposed to do it. How my name was on the list, too. The whole sick plan. Nobody said anything for like 30 seconds. Then Lisa just goes, "Are you serious right now?" Dead serious. They want me to ruin all your weeks before they ruin mine. Ben shook his head. That's messed up, man. What are you going to do? I looked at all of them. These people I'd worked with every day for 2 years, and I knew what I had to do. I'm going to quit. And honestly, you should too. We all marched back inside together. I went straight to HR while the others went to their desks. Amanda looked surprised to see me back so soon. "I'm not doing your dirty work," I said, dropping the clipboard on her desk. "Consider this my resignation." She started sputtering about my contract and professional obligations, but I was already walking away. By the time I got back to the main office, Kevin was closing his laptop. Then Lisa started packing her stuff. Ben deleted something from his computer and logged out. Jake the intern just stood there watching all of us. "What's happening?" "We're leaving," Lisa told him. "You should probably start looking for a new internship." One by one, we dropped our employee badges on the front desk. The receptionist looked confused as hell. By 3 in the afternoon, the entire product team was gone, except for Jake, who was frantically calling his supervisor. Nick, our flip-flop-wearing CEO, came running out of his office. "What's going on? Where is everyone?" "They quit," the receptionist said, pointing at the pile of badges. His face went white. Without us, they basically had no one who knew how to maintain their app. All that institutional knowledge gone in one afternoon. I heard through friends who still worked there that the app crashed 2 weeks later and stayed down for 3 days. Turns out Ben was the only one who knew how to fix their server issues. They had to hire an expensive consultant just to get back online. They went out of business 6 months. I worked for a tech startup called Flow Budget, fresh out of college. The office had free snacks, beanbags, and our CEO, Nick, wore flip-flops to meetings. For 2 years, I loved my job. My team was like family. We shared lunches, memes, and cared about making good software. I led our biggest project, saving the company $40,000 and getting us featured on a tech blog. I thought I was finally getting promoted. But Monday morning, HR called me into a tiny conference room. Amanda from HR slid a clipboard across the table with 5 names, all from my team. We need to downsize the product division. These employees must be terminated by Friday. I stared in disbelief. Then I saw it, my name at the bottom of the list too. Amanda nodded. You'll handle firing the others first, then we'll discuss your severance. I couldn't believe it. They wanted me to fire my friends, then get fired myself? She smiled like it was normal. My stomach dropped. Back at my desk, everyone was working normally, clueless. I messaged all 5 people. Meet me in the park across the street. Don't ask questions, just come. We gathered under a big oak tree and I told them everything. For 30 silent seconds, then Lisa said, "Are you serious?" Dead serious. We all decided then. We were quitting. We marched back inside. I went straight to HR. "I'm not doing your dirty work." "Consider this my resignation," Amanda sputtered, but I walked away. Back in the office, Kevin, Lisa, and Ben packed up. Even Jake, the intern, knew. "We're leaving," Lisa said. "Start looking for a new internship." By 3 p.m., the whole product team was gone except Jake, frantic on the phone. The CEO came out pale. "Where is everyone?" The receptionist pointed to the pile of badges. His face turned white. Without us, the app crashed 2 weeks later and stayed down for 3 days. Ben was the only one who knew how to fix the servers. They had to hire an expensive consultant. 6 months later, the company shut down. Story. My wife slapped me in the face when I refused to give my parents' house to her sister who had just graduated from college. She yelled, "I want you out of this house now." "You bastard," I calmly replied. "Okay." The next week, when she tried to move in, they were shocked to receive instead of the keys a letter that said, Chapter 1, The Cracks at Home. The house wasn't just walls and bricks. It was the last thing my parents left me. Every corner carried their presence. The polished wooden banister my father sanded by hand. The rose garden my mother tended with pride. The creak in the hallway floor that reminded me of nights sneaking in as a boy. I took care of it. Paid the taxes, kept it in good repair, honored the family name. But to my wife, it was never enough. She'd grown more impatient over the years, letting her younger sister's envy poison her. Her sister had just graduated college, arrogant and entitled, already looking for a shortcut to luxury. And my wife, blinded by loyalty to her, had begun pushing me harder. "Why let it sit in your name?" she asked one evening as we ate in silence. "My sister could live here. She deserves a chance to start life properly. You've already had your time." Her words stung, my time. This was my bloodline's home. But every day she pushed harder, egged on by her sister whispering in her ear. Soon her parents joined in too, dropping hints about young people needing opportunity while side-eyeing me like I was hoarding treasure. It all came to a head on a Friday evening. I had just come home from work, dust still on my shirt from fixing the old shed roof. I stepped inside, tired but content, when the demand came sharp and cold. "Hand the house to my sister." I froze. My wife's sister was standing there, smirk plastered on her face, arms crossed like she was already the owner. I looked at my wife, waiting for her to laugh it off, but instead she stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Do it." Now I shook my head slowly. "This house belongs to my family. It's not yours to give." The words had barely left my mouth when her hand cracked across my face. The sting burned hot, but not as hot as the words that followed. "I want you out of this house now, you bastard." Her sister chuckled in the background, enjoying the show. I touched my cheek, locked eyes with her, and felt the fire inside me cool into something sharper. I nodded once calmly, "Okay," and I walked out. Chapter 2, The Calm Exit. The slap burned, but I refused to let it ignite me into shouting. That's what they wanted, a scene. Instead, I chose silence. Her sister leaned back against the armchair, smirking as if she had orchestrated a perfect victory. My wife stood over me, chest heaving, her eyes still filled with rage, and her parents, who had come by to talk, sat quietly on the sofa, pretending to be neutral, while their eyes betrayed approval of her actions. They all thought they had cornered me, stripped me of dignity. But what they didn't understand was that dignity isn't something you give away. It's something you protect in silence. I straightened my shirt, picked up my jacket from the chair, and walked to the door. "Okay," I repeated softly without looking back. My voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that unsettles people more than rage ever could. Behind me, her sister whispered with a laugh, "He finally knows his place." But if they thought my quiet exit was defeat, they hadn't learned a thing about me. As I walked out, I noticed the neighbors across the street watching from their porch. The raised voices inside had carried through the open windows. They looked at me with sympathy, and I gave them only a small nod before getting into my car. By the time I drove away, I knew the story was already spreading. The image of my wife slapping me, demanding her sister inherit my family's home, would not stay confined within those four walls. They thought I had walked away beaten. What they didn't know was that my calm exit wasn't surrender. It was the beginning of their undoing. Chapter 3: The Sisters' Week of Arrogance. The week that followed my quiet departure was the longest performance of their lives. A show built on entitlement and arrogance. My wife's sister wasted no time in declaring victory. By the next morning, she was already telling her friends, neighbors, and anyone who would listen. "The house is mine now." He finally gave up. She posted online photos of herself posing in front of the gate, captions dripping with triumph. Comments flooded in congratulating her on her new home, while she basked in the attention like a queen receiving her crown. Her parents fueled the fire. They joined her charade, speaking proudly at family gatherings about how their daughter had secured her future. They even began inviting relatives to visit her new home, as if my existence had been erased entirely. For them, my silence meant surrender, and they savored every second. My wife, though, was quieter than usual. She had slapped me, screamed at me, thrown me out. But deep down, the memory unsettled her. She hadn't expected me to stay so calm to walk away without a fight. Every night, she replayed the scene in her mind, wondering if she had really won, or if she had just lit a fuse she couldn't see burning. By midweek, her sister was already making plans. She ordered new curtains and rugs. She sketched out renovation ideas. She even bragged about throwing a housewarming party once she officially moved in. Boxes of her belongings started piling up at the entrance, ready for the grand move-in day. But none of them realized that every step closer to their fantasy was a step closer to humiliation. They thought I was gone for good. But what they didn't know was that the house wasn't theirs to win. It was their trap, waiting to snap shut the moment they reached for the keys. Chapter 4: The Move-In Day. The week of boasting and parading came to a close with a single date circled on their calendars: Move-In Day. That morning, a car pulled up outside the house. My wife, her sister, and their parents piled out, arms full of boxes, bags, and that smug energy of people who thought they had already won. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. Everyone knew what was happening. Word of my wife's big win had spread far and wide. They came to watch, some whispering, some shaking their heads. Her sister strutted up to the front gate like royalty arriving at her castle. "At last," she said loudly, making sure the neighbors could hear. "Our home. Delivery for you," he said smoothly, handing the envelope directly to my wife's sister. She frowned confused but tore it open anyway. The neighbors leaned forward curious. My wife's sister's smile began to falter as her eyes scanned the first lines. Her lips trembled. Her voice cracked as she read aloud, trying to keep her confidence intact. "This property belongs exclusively to my son. It cannot be transferred, sold, or claimed by anyone outside the bloodline." Gasps rose from the neighbors. Her father stepped forward, snatching the paper, his face blanching as he read further. My wife stood frozen, her box of belongings slipping from her hands. They had come with boxes ready to celebrate a new beginning. But all they were holding now was my father's ironclad words. A letter that slammed the door in their faces before they ever had the chance to cross the threshold. And the entire neighborhood was watching. Chapter 5: The Letter's Judgment. The letter shook in her sister's hands. What was supposed to be a triumphant moment. The day she claimed my family's legacy turned into a public trial she could never win. The words were sharp, written years before, but they carried my father's tone so vividly that everyone who read them could almost hear his voice echoing across the porch. "This house belongs solely to my son. It cannot be transferred, sold, or inherited by anyone outside the bloodline. To attempt otherwise is not only invalid in the eyes of the law, but an insult to this family's name." My wife's sister's eyes darted nervously across the gathered neighbors. She tried to laugh it off, but the tremble in her voice betrayed her. At the bottom of the page was a notarized seal and my father's signature. It wasn't just sentiment. It was law, ironclad, untouchable. Her father grabbed the letter next, muttering under his breath as he read line by line. His shoulders slumped. Her mother's face turned crimson with shame, whispering, "They're all watching." And she was right. The neighbors hadn't moved. They stood silently, taking in every detail. Every word of the letter became another nail sealing the coffin of their arrogance. My wife, who once raised her hand against me in that very house, looked pale and broken. She clutched the strap of her handbag, her eyes wet. She whispered to herself, almost inaudible, "What have I done?" But regret doesn't erase betrayal. They came with boxes and plans of grandeur. But now, under the gaze of their community, all they carried was a single letter, a verdict from the grave that declared their greed worthless and their claim non-existent. And in that moment, it wasn't just a house they lost. It was their dignity. Chapter 6: The Desperation and Collapse. The letter had broken them. What was supposed to be their victory march had turned into a walk of shame under the watchful eyes of neighbors. But humiliation has a way of digging deeper when desperation sets in. My wife's sister tore at the letter as if ripping the paper could undo its contents. "This is a fraud. It's a trick. He made this up." Her words rang hollow. The seal at the bottom and the notarized stamp were undeniable. The neighbors weren't convinced. Instead, they looked at her with pity and disgust. She, the self-proclaimed owner, was nothing more than a greedy pretender. She tried yelling at the courier, demanding the keys. He simply shook his head, pointed to the letter again, and walked away without a word. The image of her screaming at a retreating man became the final punchline of her arrogance. Her parents, who had fueled their daughter's delusions all week, now stood frozen. Her father's face was red with fury, but not at me at the humiliation of being exposed in public. Her mother clutched her bag, whispering, "Everyone's watching. We need to leave now." But the crowd of neighbors wouldn't move. They wanted to see this to the end. And my wife, she wasn't yelling anymore. She wasn't defending her sister. She simply stood there, silent tears streaking her face. The memory of her slap, her words, "Get out of this house, you bastard," came back to her like poison. She had chosen greed over love, betrayal over loyalty. And now she stood outside the house her husband still owned, unable to step inside. I didn't show myself that day. I didn't need to. My father's foresight had spoken louder than anything I could have said. The humiliation was complete. They had tried to erase me with arrogance and violence. But now, before the eyes of the entire community, it wasn't me who was gone. It was them, stripped of pride, respect, and the illusion of power. Chapter 7: The Final Consequence and Epilogue. The humiliation of move-in day wasn't the end. It was the beginning of their long descent. The story of her arrogance spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Every time she walked into a cafe or a family gathering, whispers followed. "That's the one who tried to steal her brother-in-law's house and got exposed in front of everyone." Friends who once hung on her words now avoided her. Even her job prospects took a hit. No employer wanted someone known for entitlement and scandal. She had gone from flaunting her new house to being a walking cautionary tale. Her parents carried their own burden. They had stood by silently, complicit in the insult, hoping to benefit from their daughter's scheme. Now, every social interaction was a reminder of their humiliation. Invitations to community events grew fewer. Conversations grew shorter. Their once respected name was tied to betrayal. For my wife, the collapse was personal and devastating. She replayed that night endlessly in her mind. The slap, the words, "I want you out of this house, you bastard." Only to realize she had thrown away everything for a dream that was never hers to claim. When she tried to call me weeks later, her voice trembling with apologies, I didn't answer. Forgiveness might ease her guilt, but it wouldn't erase the betrayal, and my father's trust had already closed the door behind her. Meanwhile, I stayed where I had always belonged. In my father's home, the house built by his hands and guarded by his foresight. I tended the garden, polished the wood he once sanded, and slept peacefully under the roof they had tried to snatch from me. I didn't need to shout to seek revenge or to explain. The legacy itself was my shield, and their collapse was the echo of their own greed. She once slapped me and screamed, "I want you out of this house now, you bastard." But in the end, it wasn't me who left. It was her forever.